Why do intelligent people reject social life? Not out of arrogance, out of an ache for something real. Have you ever tasted that ache the moment a party ends and the silence finally speaks? The room still hums with polite laughter, but your mind drifts elsewhere, listening for a deeper music no one else seems to hear. You wonder, is there more to life than this choreography of smiles and small talk? You sense a veil, thin shimmering, fragile, between conversation and truth, and suddenly you're tempted to lift it. Pause. Feel the hush settling around that temptation. In this hush, solitude calls you by name, not to punish you, but to invite you home. Tonight we follow that call. We will walk past the noisy boulevards of social expectation and step into the dimly lit corridors of the inner world, Schopenhauer's world, where the price of awareness is high, but the reward is freedom. Stay with me. What waits beyond the crowd may change how you inhabit every moment that follows. You know the instant. Voices blur. Glass clinks. Someone jokes about weekend plans, yet a thin chill slides between your ribs, whispering, "I don't belong here." It isn't dislike, it's dissonance. Like hearing an orchestra tune to the wrong key, while you alone catch the discord. What you feel has a name: social dissonance. Psychologists describe it as the moment your inner frequency outgrows the surface rhythm of the room. Schopenhauer would say your intellect has slipped behind the stage curtain and glimpsed the set props for what they are: painted plywood, not marble. Consider Elon Musk at a UCLA frat party in the 1990s. Friends recall him slipping away mid-conversation, walking home to keep coding because the chatter felt hollow. Or Emily Dickinson, standing at the parlor door, retreating upstairs with her pencil while the town danced below. Different centuries, same sensation. Feeling outside the circle isn't pathology, it's perception. When the party feels shallow, it doesn't mean you're sinking. It means the water is. Honor the signal. It invites you to depths where conversation becomes communion. So ask yourself, if one ordinary evening can expose the cardboard of social ritual, what happens when you look closer at every desire that keeps you in the crowd? That question leads us to part 2, where Schopenhauer's brutal clarity shows why solitude becomes an act of mercy. Most people avoid silence, but Schopenhauer, he made a home in it, not because he disliked people, but because he saw through them. Imagine watching a play long enough that the actors begin repeating themselves. You know the lines before they're spoken. You see the laugh before the punchline. And suddenly, what once felt vibrant now feels mechanical. That's what Schopenhauer experienced, not in the theater, but in life. He wasn't a pessimist just to be edgy. He believed most social interactions were not about connection, but about performance ego on stage, rehearsing lines written by fear, desire, and social expectation. To him, solitude wasn't loneliness. It was refusal. Refusal to participate in a script where no one meant what they said and everyone was secretly waiting for their turn to speak. Arthur Schopenhauer spent most of his life in self-imposed isolation. He never married. He rarely attended salons or lectures. He walked alone every day, at the same hour spoke mostly to his dog, and read obsessively. To the world, he seemed eccentric, but to himself, he was finally in a space where he could think clearly, without interruption, without pretense. Sometimes, solitude isn't an escape from others, it's a return to yourself. And that return can only happen when you no longer need applause to feel real. In Schopenhauer's view, the fewer the voices around you, the closer you come to hearing your own. But here's where it turns darker. Because once you step away from the noise, you begin to see how much of it was never real to begin with. And for the intelligent mind, That realization doesn't bring peace, it brings pain. The party sparkles, lights laughter, the fizz of champagne, yet you feel the room is made of cardboard, propped up for a single evening. You smile, but your eyes refuse to join the masquerade. Listen closely. Every joke lands on cue. Every compliment sounds rehearsed, and you suddenly realize you are surrounded by actors who don't know they're acting. It's the moment Truman senses the sky might actually be a painted dome. Neuroscientists call it high self-monitoring. Schopenhauer called it seeing through the veil. When intelligence sharpens perception, the fabric of small talk becomes transparent. Praise disguises insecurity, gossip camouflages boredom, and politeness hides power games. To the sharp mind, these rituals feel less like communion, more like choreography steps, memorized smiles lacquered on. Take Keanu Reeves, renowned for quietly riding the subway in New York, slipping out of Hollywood galas after just one drink. Reporters asked why he avoids red carpet chatter. He shrugged, "I prefer encounters that aren't performances." Or remember Robin Williams, backstage, giddy on stage, contemplative in the wings, confessing to friends that crowds felt like mirrors reflecting versions of himself that weren't quite true. Different men, same instinct. The script grows thin. The soul itches for an unscripted line. If the dialogue around you feels hollow, it isn't proof you're cynical. It's proof you're listening for truth. Treat that discomfort as a compass. Let it steer you toward conversations where minds meet naked of pretense, even if that means fewer conversations overall. But once you notice the stage lights and painted props, what happens to the actor's joy? Awareness carries a cost, and the first invoice is suffering. It begins quietly. Not with screams, but with silence. A silence that follows you after you've seen too much, known too much, understood too deeply. To the unbothered, the world is simple work, laugh, repeat. But the intelligent mind, it sees impermanence in the handshake, mortality in the birthday cake, and futility in the chase. What once seemed joyful now flickers with the shadow of ending. Schopenhauer believed that to know deeply is to suffer deeply. Because knowledge is a knife, it peels away the comfort of illusion. You see the chase for wealth as a game of moving goalposts. You see romance stained with ego. You see yourself striving, yet never arriving. This, he says, is the curse of the will, a blind, relentless force that drives all living beings to want and want and want. But the cruel twist, every fulfilled desire only births another, and in between there is longing, always longing. Think of David Foster Wallace, whose towering intellect dissected the absurdity of modern life with surgical precision, and yet who battled unbearable internal storms. Or Virginia Woolf, whose mind could capture the depths of time and consciousness on the page, but collapsed under the weight of that very sensitivity. They weren't weak. They were awake. An awakening is not painless. Suffering, then, isn't always a sign that something's gone wrong. Sometimes, it's a sign you've stopped lying to yourself. You're not depressed, you're de-illusioned. And while that hurts, it also purifies, because just like gold, the soul must pass through fire to lose its impurities. But here's where Schopenhauer's insight cuts even deeper. Because if pain is the symptom of intelligence, what then is the cure? He believed it wasn't an escape, but in withdrawal. Not running from the world, but stepping out of it. It's 2 a.m. Your phone screen glows like a tiny sun, pulling you into one more scroll, one more click, one more dopamine spark. You know you're tired, yet you swipe. why Schopenhauer called it the will, a blind, restless current running beneath every heartbeat, whispering want, want, want. Most never notice the whisper. They only obey its tug. The will isn't desire for any single thing. It's desire itself, an engine that can't be turned off, only redirected. Feed it money, it asks for power. Feed it power, it asks for admiration. Feed it admiration, it asks for immortality. And so the average life becomes a carousel of cravings, each promise dissolving the moment it's touched. Modern neuroscience maps this dance in our brains. Dopamine spikes at the anticipation, not the fulfillment. We chase the notification more than the message, the like more than the connection. The will keeps running because its true goal is never satisfaction, only motion. Consider the late Anthony Bourdain. He circled the globe tasting the planet's richest flavors, yet confessed on camera, "I'm hungry for something I can't name." Or look at Silicon Valley app designers who forbid their own children from using the very platforms they built. They know the will's circuitry too well. Recognizing the will doesn't cancel it, but it changes your stance. Instead of being dragged by the current, you plant your feet and watch the river rush past. Every impulse becomes a bell you can choose not to answer, because freedom is not killing the will. It's seeing it clearly, then deciding when to act and when to sit perfectly still. Yet clarity invites a new question. If the world outside is wired to fuel endless wanting, where can a mind rest? Schopenhauer's answer was simple: step away from the world entirely, if only for a while. Close the door. No sound but the soft hum of your own breath. No conversations to decode, no smiles to mirror. Just stillness, dense, unfamiliar, almost holy. That's where it begins. In solitude, there's no one left to impress, no applause to chase. And in that absence, you start to hear a voice you forgot existed your own. Schopenhauer didn't just accept solitude, he sanctified it. To him, solitude wasn't a lack of company, but the restoration of selfhood. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. Because the moment others enter the room, we begin to edit our words, our posture, even our thoughts. And so we fragment piece by piece until we become a collage of expectations. Solitude interrupts that fragmentation. It returns you to wholeness." Modern psychology affirms this. Studies show that people who intentionally spend time alone have sharper focus, deeper creativity, and greater emotional regulation. Not because they're antisocial, but because they're self-regulated. Think of Nikola Tesla, who claimed his greatest inventions came during long walks alone at night. Or Agnes Martin, the abstract painter who left New York City at the peak of her fame to live in the desert in silence, where she painted, meditated, and spoke to no one for years. They weren't escaping life. They were diving into it unfiltered. Solitude is not retreat. It is recalibration. Like tuning a musical instrument after too many performances. It doesn't make you less connected. It makes you selective about what's worth connecting to. And once you've tasted the stillness of solitude, you stop mistaking noise for nourishment. But solitude does more than quiet the world. It reveals just how deeply the world tried to shape you. And once you've seen that, you begin to ask, what if I let it all go? You were taught to care what they think, to care how you look, to care if you're liked, followed, approved. But what happens when you stop? Imagine standing still in a room where everyone is spinning, smiling, clapping on cue. You don't move. And suddenly, all eyes are on you. Not because you're wrong, but because you become a mirror to their trance. Schopenhauer understood something radical. Freedom doesn't begin with saying yes. It begins with saying no. No to appearances. No to applause. No to the rituals of belonging that demand your authenticity as payment. He didn't hate the crowd. He simply saw it for what it was, a stage driven by the will, propped up by ego, fueled by imitation. To detach from it wasn't withdrawal. It was rebellion. Not loud, not angry, but so inwardly resolute, it shook the foundation of conformity. Detachment, then, is not coldness. It is clarity. It is saying, I will not let the world sculpt me with tools I did not choose. Look at Jiddu Krishnamurti, who was groomed to be a spiritual world leader, only to renounce the role entirely, declaring, truth is a pathless land. Or Marcus Aurelius writing Meditations in the Tent of War, detached not from duty, but from praise, gossip, and fear. They moved through the world, but they were not moved by it. To detach is not to drift, it is to anchor in what's real. It is choosing stillness over stimulation, truth over trend, self-respect over self-display. In a culture addicted to reaction, the most powerful thing you can do is pause. But what happens when you finally detach? When the world no longer dictates your rhythm, your worth, your reality, that's when you begin to build a life that's truly yours. So now the volume is off. The crowd fades. The applause, the performance, the pressure to be anything but real gone. You're alone, and for the first time you're free. But free to do what detachment creates, a clearing. But meaning must be planted intentionally, carefully. Like a garden that no longer grows weeds, but only what you choose to water. Schopenhauer didn't advocate nihilism. He didn't say life was meaningless. He said it was full of false meanings. Strip them away, and what's left isn't emptiness. It's raw potential. The intelligent mind, once it's shed, the illusions must now ask, what is worth my time? What is worth my energy? What is worth my soul? The answer, he believed, was not in achievement or admiration, but in stillness, in contemplation, in the quiet pursuit of beauty, truth, and depth. Think of Leonard Cohen, who left fame behind to spend years in a Zen monastery sweeping floors and meditating before returning to music with lyrics that cut deeper than ever. Or Toni Morrison, who wrote late at night after her children were asleep, not for the world's approval, but for the truth she felt demanded birth. They built lives that weren't loud, but lives that mattered. A meaningful life isn't built on what you add, but on what you stop chasing. It's not found in the rush. It's revealed in the silence that follows it. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to start removing what isn't yours. Because clarity is not a destination, it's a discipline. And meaning doesn't arrive by accident. It's something you carve slowly out of everything false you finally let go. But even in that stillness, even in a life shaped by truth, there is one shadow that remains. A presence that walks beside intelligence like a silent twin suffering. You've built your sanctuary. The noise is gone. The masks are off. And yet, in the quiet, something lingers. A weight. A hush that is not peace, but ache. You no longer belong to the crowd, but neither do you fully escape the pain. Why? Because intelligence doesn't cure suffering, it clarifies it. Schopenhauer didn't romanticize pain, he dissected it. To him, suffering wasn't a mistake in the design of life. It was the design. Because the more conscious we become, the more impossible it is to hide from impermanence, loss, and futility. The laughter of a child becomes a whisper of time passing. a celebration becomes a countdown. Even joy is tinged with grief because you know it cannot stay. He called it the curse of awareness, the ability to see the absurdity, the fragility, the endless hunger of existence, and still go on. Consider Franz Kafka, whose writing reads like someone translating pain into poetry. Or Carl Jung, who said, "A man's suffering is not in vain if it can be turned into meaning." Even in our time, thinkers like David Whyte speak of pain not as failure, but as the doorway to depth. It's not that intelligent people suffer more. It's that they suffer consciously. They name what others deny. They sit where others flee. Suffering isn't the enemy. It's a mirror. It shows you what you long for. It reveals where your attachments still live. And if you're brave enough to sit with it, not fix it, not silence it, just witness it, it begins to soften. The pain never disappears, but it becomes something sacred, not noise, but signal. And so if pain walks beside the awakened mind, how do we walk with it without letting it define us? The answer Schopenhauer suggests is not to escape pain, but to transcend desire, the root of it all. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when nothing excites you, nothing offends you, and for the first time, you are not hungry for anything. Not applause, not escape, not even understanding. Just stillness. You sit beneath the noise and realize you don't need more, you need less. Less chasing, less reacting, less pretending to care about what never mattered. To Schopenhauer, this was the highest state the mind could reach, not triumph over others, but liberation from the will. The will, remember, is not just desire, it's compulsion. It is what makes people run in circles, sacrificing peace for progress, love for control, truth for appearance. But when the intelligent mind sees through the will, not once, but over and over, something shifts. The craving loses its grip. The game loses its appeal. And what's left is not emptiness, it's clarity. Modern mindfulness echoes this. Meditation, simplicity, deep presence, not as productivity hacks, but as ways to return to a self untouched by the world's demands. Think of Thich Nhat Hanh, walking slowly, silently, a cup of tea in his hands, fully present, not because he rejected the world, but because he no longer needed it to complete him. Or Albert Einstein, who once said, "A calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success, combined with constant restlessness." Stillness is not passivity. It is mastery. It is not about withdrawing forever. It's about returning stronger, quieter, unshakable. When you stop needing the world to be a certain way, you start seeing it as it truly is. Messy, fleeting, beautiful. You stop trying to bend it and begin to flow with it. That's not giving up. That's waking up. That's freedom. So ask yourself, what could happen if you stopped performing, stopped chasing, stopped pretending, and simply chose to be, not in the eyes of others, but in your own? If this voice echoed something inside you, subscribe, because the world won't teach you this, but your soul already knows it, and it's time you remembered.